Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're gonna perform a repotting, but it's not a typical repotting. So up until now, we've unpotted a few orchids that were not really all that hard to repot because they didn't have as many roots as to completely fill up the pot. But orchid roots filling up the pot is not uncommon, and we call those orchids root-bound or pot-bound. Now those orchids are pretty difficult to repot, and I'll show you on the screen some pictures that I took with two of my orchids which I've repotted in this weekend. Both of them had a lot of roots, and as you can see, the root ball already has the shape of the pot, and inside there's the medium. Now those orchids have already been repotted, and the amount of roots damaged in the process was 0. So today we'll attempt to repot another root-bound orchid. I'm not entirely sure if it is at that level, but she's not coming out of her pot easily, therefore I am soaking it just to make the roots flexible, expand, and avoid unnecessary damage. So let's let this orchid soak up a little bit, unpluck her from the pot and see what we find, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to show you how I'm going to repot it and make a little comparison to how this process would go in organic medium. Okay, so what we have here is not necessarily the most root-bound of orchids. I've seen worse, but she's definitely getting there. Now, as I was saying, the amount of roots actually damaged with the other two was 0, and that's what I'm planning to do with this orchid as well. And actually, this is where the true beauty of inorganic medium shines. So what I'm gonna do with this orchid right now is leave it as it is. I checked it for dead roots. It doesn't have dead roots. Not even these ones in the back, they're still stiff. So the only procedure that I'm gonna do is prepare my plastic pot, put a layer of medium on the bottom, and by the way, I can totally reuse this medium. As it's not broken down, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't even look like it has salt accumulations. Anyway, I plan on really soaking my orchids periodically, so that will not be an issue. The only roots that I will not pot are the aerial roots because they might not adapt to this amount of humidity. This is not something particular to inorganic medium. It can happen in all sorts of mediums. And now that my orchid is arranged in her pot, all I need to do is just place medium around the roots. And being that I have a plastic pot, I can totally squeeze a little bit on it. Pretty much just work on getting the medium around the roots. And with that, the repotting process is actually over. All I want to do right now is to give this orchid a good soak, just to make sure that whatever salts this medium contained are getting dissolved. Also, whatever salts I have on the upper roots, again, are getting dissolved. I do this with all the orchids that I am repotting right now. And because I am using plastic pots with a lot of ventilation holes and a lot of drainage holes at the bottom, all debris and dust are coming out really fast. Now, let's think a little bit how this process would go in organic medium, such as bark. Well, personally, I would go about trying to remove every little piece of medium from the root system. Experience has taught me that it's really not a good idea to leave a lot of old medium attached to the roots. I won't elaborate, but of course you can see a video about it in the description. So pretty much I would take my tweezers and I would start to remove the bits and pieces of moss and of bark. And of course I would be very gentle and take my time, and in about half an hour I might reach somewhere. More often than not, in the process I would have damaged quite a lot of the roots. I would say about 50%. Now, with some orchids it's not a huge deal, but with others, such as Cattleyas, root damage is really not ideal. Whenever you repot a Cattleya, there's a high chance you will lose all of the old roots. So a lot of the times it happened that I thought I removed all of the dead roots, I potted up my Cattleya, and in about a month, I felt the medium starting to smell really bad. I would have to go back in, cut away another set of roots because they died in the process. As a result of root loss, the orchid would have been set back, the new pseudobulbs would have been tinier. So pretty much a delay in growth, and if it just so happened that I was working on a Cattleya with a growth pattern of 1 pseudobulb per year, well, the wait would have been excruciating. And when the pseudobulb finally reached a decent size to bloom, what do you know? It's been 2 or 3 years and it's time to repot the orchid once again, and what do you know? The root system again has taken over the pot, and yet again I have to remove all of the medium. Now, of course, I'm giving you an extreme case. Sometimes it really doesn't happen, and I am the first to tell you with Phalaenopsis it doesn't happen. Those orchids absolutely don't care you are damaging the root system. You can snap a root and it will still be fine, it will branch out, it will be viable. It doesn't happen with Cattleyas or with other orchids. Shall I mention Miltoniopsis? I dread Miltoniopsis really when it comes to repotting. And now I have a new favorite, the Phragmipedium with the most brittle roots in the world. I would have to do that process every 2 to 3 years. Well, it's pretty understandable why an orchid is set back. Because inorganic medium doesn't decompose, there is absolutely not one single need to go and remove every single little piece that is attached to the roots. Of course that if I find a few roots that are dead, I would just follow them to the pseudobulb, cut them from the pseudobulb and simply remove them. I would just remove them from the bits and pieces of medium and I would be gentle with the rest of the roots. But you can see how the process is a lot less dangerous than a normal repotting from organic medium. Not to mention, it only took 5 minutes. Not to mention, I didn't have to buy any new medium. Not to mention, whatever bits and pieces are left, I'm putting them in a pot and I'm boiling the heck out of them for 10 minutes and they're ready to be reused once again. Now this is not only valid for Ceramis and Leca. Ceramis and Leca are not the most fabulous things in the world by far. Now this doesn't only apply to Ceramis and Leca. Just because I use them doesn't make them the most perfect medium in the world, they just work for me. But it applies to all inorganic medias out there on the market. It applies to synthetic, to rock wool, to sponge rock, to lava rock, to perlite, and to whatever inorganic medium you just happen to use with orchids. As it just so happens, Leca is very popular. Ceramis is kind of just getting popularity. We don't know it all that well, at least when it comes to me, but I'm kind of loving the results so far as long as I take care of it. So as you saw, I repotted an orchid from a pot of 13 centimeters to another pot of 13 centimeters. Practically it was a good fit. I didn't need to switch pots. The reason why I'm repotting my orchids is because I'm not completely satisfied with my clay pots. However, normally, just for maintenance, an orchid should be repotted from inorganic medium only when it outgrows her pot and the pseudobulbs would just grow outside of the pot, they would get dehydrated and all of those things. With this one it wasn't the case, but with the other two that I repotted it really was, particularly with the purpurata. Now that one absolutely needed a bigger pot. So pretty much in inorganic medium, repotting should only be done when the orchid outgrows her pot, or when you have a crisis situation, such as, I don't know, you discover some pest in your pot, or you discover that for whatever reason the roots have died. That can happen in inorganic medium as well, so it's not the holy grail of mediums necessarily from this point of view. But if an orchid is healthy and it grows beautifully and nicely, repotting is only needed when the orchid is too pot bound and is too big for the pot. Now there are some concerns that you might have when it comes to this procedure. You might know that new orchids we purchase have that plug in the middle, and usually in that plug all of the roots are dead. Won't this happen with inorganic? Well, no, for 3 reasons. 1, it's inorganic, doesn't decompose, it doesn't affect the roots. 2, Ceramis and Leca are not compressible. They are very chunky pieces that will not compress with the force of the roots. Therefore, we will not have a medium so compressed that it will simply suffocate the roots. And third, the roots don't sit around doing nothing there, and if you ever had a pot-bound orchid, you know that the main inconvenience, let's say, with that one is the fact that you need to water so often. The more roots you have, the more water they will absorb faster. So in the center, the roots will still perform their number 1 job, which is to absorb water. If they're undisturbed and undamaged, there is no reason for them to simply die off. Now, because I repotted my orchid from a clay pot to a plastic pot, there is a slight chance that I will have some damages. I didn't see them. I hope it's not going to be the case. From plastic pots, roots absolutely come off right away, and there will always be a few roots that simply manage to get out from the drainage holes or from the ventilation holes. I have 2 options. Either I cut the pot, either I sacrifice those roots, but in the total mass of the roots, they will not necessarily matter. So as you can see, I am working a lot on repotting all of my orchids. You can see the purpurata right there. She really needs a big decorative pot right now, but also you can see there is no shriveling. And actually, I didn't mention the side effects of this type of repotting. Well, you will get no more shriveling, potential no more flower loss or bud loss. It also means you can theoretically repot at any time of the year, no matter if the orchid is producing new roots or not. And also theoretically, no more need for division. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I was just so frustrated with that amount of roots and with the fact that I couldn't get all the medium out that I simply decided to divide the orchid. On the long term, I knew it was beneficial for the orchid, but it also meant that I would not have a big orchid with a big number of flower spikes. I don't know if anybody else was tempted to do this. I did, and I divided or at least separated pseudobulbs from my orchids simply because the root mass was just too hard to work with it. Well, obviously that will never be the case again. So pretty much that's what's happening in my greenhouse right now, and I'm really working on repotting all of my orchids. The fact that I can repot them safely without any bit of shriveling, let me just show you. This is the Diana Dunn Gothic. no shriveling, nothing. It's just such a wonderful feeling because I know this orchid will not be set back. Even in the case that I did manage to destroy some of the roots, being that I have clay pots, it certainly is not anywhere close to how it would go in bark medium or even sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is the worst because it compacts so much and it's really hard to remove from between the roots. So being that this is the very first time when I'm repotting in this way and I'm actually not disturbing the roots, at least theoretically, of course I'm curious to see what happens in the future if the orchids are set back by this repotting, if the older roots actually do manage to dry off. Up until now, the signs suggest that they're not disturbed, which is really great, but of course we'll see what happens in the future and I will surely keep you guys up to date. Alrighty, so thank you for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchids and plants videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye! Slowly but surely, my orchids are starting to be transferred into their white pots and placed into the IKEA stand, and I really think they look really pretty. It wasn't really easy to find decorative containers that can actually fit in the stand, and the bigger ones, these ones, they're a little bit squished, but not too much. There's still a lot of ventilation between them and the actual plastic pot of the orchid.